Yeah, just so thrilled and excited that you've all taken a read. And we've had thousands of people download the free copy, which is really, really exciting because our intention with putting the book out there in the world was to get it in as many hands as possible. We weren't really putting this book out to make money or to sell copies on Amazon, although that's really great because it's a beautiful print book. But our intention really was to get this practical approach out into more places around the world and help people really see how they can apply it to both the current and future state situations. So I'll do a very quick kind of what is experience delivery blueprinting. And if you haven't seen my blog post on why we are changing the name of the service blueprint, you may want to go read that. We talk about it a bit in the book, but I go into much more depth on our Medium article, kind of talking about the reasons why we change it. And I'll give you briefly kind of my 2 minute version. Uh, when service design kind of came into the world, it's not been that long, right? 30, 40 years ish. Um, the idea was to distinguish between a product and this ongoing service relationship where a business or an organization is providing and performing something for someone else. And that is what we call a service. However, we can deliver all kinds of experiences that happen through time, and we don't necessarily have to think of them as services. And so that's really why Eric and I have kind of rethought what this method is useful for and trying to expand it. I mean, you could use it to blueprint out your daughter's birthday party that you're planning, and you wouldn't really call that a service. You're not performing a service for the attendees. I mean, you could reframe it that way, but most people don't think of it that way. Um, and so we wanted to really get to what the point of this method is about, which is how are you delivering an experience? And so that is why we call it experience delivery blueprinting. So this is a method to make evident how the backstage of an organization delivers a customer or a user experience. And there are some benefits to this. It helps us stay customer centric. It helps us look through that lens of the experience into the business. And we focus on some core components of experience delivery, the touch points, the points of interaction between the customer and the business, the roles and staff involved in delivering that experience, the technology systems, the policies and the processes that all need to work together to create a great experience. And as I mentioned, this can be used for both current state and future state situations. So these core components are really the essence of what we're trying to identify when we're doing blueprinting. And it's a little deceptive because service design is a human-centered design approach. And again, we're trying to stay customer-centric in how we look at the business. However, blueprinting is a backstage activity. It's a method focused on the backstage. It is focused on how does that backstage create the experience. And so it's really important for us to be keeping all of these components in mind. And as service designers, we have to be savvy to navigate that backstage of the business. So the blueprint as a tool, it helps us see and plan that big picture of how the experience is being delivered. It helps us look end to end across that experience and also surface to core into the business. It is a tool for gaining alignment and having a shared vocabulary and understanding across all of your business silos. And it helps us to identify backstage pain points as well as do kind of a root cause analysis of what's leading to customer pain points. You can use it as an ideation tool and come up with ideas for improving the experience or new service concepts altogether. And it generates actionable work, as we are going to talk about today, where we take and harvest out from the blueprint the pieces that are going to become action items in your backlog or your team's to-do lists. So I'll distinguish between the current and future state. Current state is really about auditing the experience. It's how is it today? How can we improve it? And it's because of that, the activity is very different. It's an investigative activity. You're looking for root cause. You're looking for kind of issues and pain points and kind of where things are breaking down, and you're looking for how you can fix those. Future state blueprinting is totally different. It's an imaginary design activity. Yeah, exactly. Detective work, Ricardo. Future state is this, you're imagining what it could be. And so you're being generative and you're brainstorming as part of the method. And so even though you're using the same format, it's a very different activity engaging your stakeholders. Here are some example blueprints. And I show these because a blueprint can look very different depending on what you need it to look like. You can, it can be paper, you can use whatever tool you want. You could keep it in the swim lanes, you can not. But for us, the emphasis was on practical, right? We wanted to be able to do this in real time with stakeholders. And the original kind of service blueprint format really does not lend itself well to that. I have another article on Medium about that. If you want to read that, I can share the link later. So how does the experience blueprint work? I'm going to skim over this very quickly. We have our end to end. We have the scenario, which is, think of it like a linear story of a specific use case. We have both visible and hidden steps in that scenario. And we break it down into phases to really try to tell the story. And this helps your stakeholders wrap their heads around where they fit, because often in a particular phase, a business silo will be engaged in that phase. So if you think about like a phase of onboarding, you probably have a team that's working on onboarding or user acquisition, and they might need to be involved. And so the phases are tools to help you connect with different pieces of your business. This surface to core, you have layers that help paint the picture of how the delivery is happening. And then you have layers that are about capturing the insights and helping you uncover those actionable next steps. When you do a couple different blueprints, so you take a few different scenarios, it's like you're getting coverage of your ecosystem of your operations. And if you pick just a few key scenarios, you will actually get the majority of what you need. It's kind of like when you're doing usability testing or user interviews, when you get 5 to 7, users, you've probably covered 80% of the issues. So similar to that, you don't need to blueprint every scenario, but having a few different ones lets you triangulate and get coverage. I mentioned the front and the backstage steps. So the steps that are we use the white color because they're visible, they're lighter. These are the customer steps, and then the hidden steps, the ones in the shadows, are the backstage of the business. And what we do is we take each layer, and really this is a data visualization that you're creating. It's like a heat map with a bunch of data in it. And so we can pull out the different dimensions of this data and use it to drive action and turn it into a roadmap. So our future state blueprint template, it looks like this and has mostly the same core component layers, except we distinguish when we're designing something new. We want to think ahead to kind of managing risk. So potential pitfalls are things that could go wrong in the step. And we want to plan for that in the design to make it more resilient. The rationale is for capturing why did we design it the way we did, because you kind of need to talk about your reasoning when you go back to the rest of your stakeholders who weren't part of the process. And then questionable notes are kind of just there because those always happen in whatever session you're in. The difference between a current state template and the future state being that design activity. In current state, we're looking for kind of these critical moments of breakdown where we know things are happening that are challenges either for the customer or the backstage. And we're looking for those opportunities of improvement because this is a current state and we're trying to figure out how to make it better. Also, metrics come into play in current state because we have that data, hopefully, to lean on and learn more about our work. Clarify the step between step and process. Great question. So we look at a linear scenario and think of it like a very specific story or use case. I think Teresa Torres calls it like a story map, right? It just pick a linear set of steps through that's anchored on the user experience. And then we use that and kind of add in the backstage steps as needed. The difference between our scenario and a process is a documentation of, yes, it happens linear through time, but there's potentially all sorts of branching and loops and checkpoints, right? And so when a specific person navigates through a process, They basically paint a linear storyline through that multidimensional process map. And you could have multiple scenarios of navigating a particular process depending on how complex it is. And what we're interested in here is we want to pick one of those. We want to pick your primary path. We want to pick a problem path, a challenging path. And so while the process might be a model, like a task flow diagram, for example, for a user experience, right? It's a model of how people could traverse your business or your offering or your service. The scenario is a specific example of someone doing that. So it's more like a use case. Hopefully that answers your question. So let's come to the last chapter of the book. So taking action after blueprinting. And I admit it is the shortest chapter in the book. And that's part of why I think it's great for us to talk about it today, because there's a lot to unpack here. And when you're writing a book, you have to kind of decide where it starts and ends. And so we could write a whole book on how to take action, not just after blueprinting, but after any sort of holistic design activity. And so something that, Erik and I have talked about is how can we kind of take that idea of the implementation and the action step and maybe turn that into its own book someday or its own resource. So let's talk specifically about blueprinting. And I'm going to separate these between current state and future state. So in current state, right, we've generated a lot of ideas for how to improve the experience and the backstage operations. Now, the vehicle for improving the experience is to improve the backstage. And so a lot of these ideas will be, things that have to go to certain teams in your organization. And so what we do is we harvest out of the blueprint and the session where we've brainstormed all those opportunities and those critical moments of potential breakdown or pain points, things that aren't working well. And we can theme those and into categories that become opportunity areas. So you could imagine maybe our customer has a lot of pain points around the sign up process, for example. And our opportunity that we've identified is that we need to improve and streamline the sign up process. So that would be a thematic area or an opportunity area that we identify. And then what we're looking for in those possible ideas that we've generated is what's kind of we can just go do this right now, like a tactical next step, versus what's a bigger picture strategic thing that needs to get moved forward in the organization. And the reason we distinguish between tactical and strategic is that the way that work gets done, as I'm sure you all know, is different in organizations and requires a lot of different sponsorship and buy-in and handoffs. And so for doing something quickly, like, oh wow, we just need to move that button like over to this side of the page, or what if we reduce the screen? That's super tactical and something you could go work directly with a product owner on, to get it to happen. And then, yeah, great question, Betsy, about do you usually find themes by stage or across the entire blueprint? Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we just capture that kind of off to the side while we're blueprinting, like it doesn't necessarily tuck under a step, or we just tuck it under a step and maybe it shows up like over and over and over. And that's fine too. And when people are generating ideas in a session, as a facilitator, I try not to limit them to like, oh, we're just talking about this step right now. You don't want to be like super limiting. If they're generating great ideas, just capture it. Doesn't matter where you put it because you're going to harvest it out of that blueprint anyway. And yes, exactly, Kelly. Making the blueprint is the point. Like the point is not to have an artifact of a pretty map. The point is to have the conversation. I love that. And so once we have these tactical and strategic insights in these opportunity areas, you can go about your normal way that your organization plans work. And so the reason we're not super prescriptive in this chapter and in our method generally is that different organizations have different cultures and different teams have different methods and tools they use to do prioritization, whether you're doing a 2x2 impact versus effort, or if there's technical backlogs, or if there's ways your organization does OKRs, or whatever it is. We're not going to prescribe that to you. There's lots of different ways to plan work. But the trick with any sort of implementation is you have to have ownership and accountability. And it's your job, unfortunately, as the blueprint project process driver to ensure that someone takes that ownership and accountability and that you connect the dots. So we're talking a little bit about like general leadership skills and even a bit more tactically about kind of project management skills that as a service designer, we have to be really good at that. We have to be good at managing the workflow of our process and ensuring that we're engaging stakeholders appropriately and getting commitments from people. Okay. Um, Current state layers and what to do with them. So this is new content that we wrote just for the book and thinking about each data layer that you have generated in this blueprint. Again, it's really just a big data visualization that you're creating. We can pull things out. And what are these useful for? So you can take the steps and you can use that to tell the story. And this is really, really important because as you're going out to tell the story of both your project where you're doing this blueprinting effort, as well as the experience that the customer is having and the connection between the backstage and how it's creating this experience. If there's a painful part of the experience, we need to be able to tell that story and connect the dots. So that's what the steps end up being for. It's being you can illustrate it even. You draw some storyboards, take some screenshots, have it be visual, make a video to tell the story. The touch points, the once we harvest all of those out, this becomes an inventory. So a big list of all the touch points, and you can do additional type work on that inventory, looking for cohesion, brand cohesion, experience cohesion across all those touch points. You can kind of look for weak spots, see if there's some patterns in this touch point is kind of a weak spot. And so maybe that's contributing to this experience issue. The roles also, you can inventory all those and understand the big picture of who's involved in your backstage and your operations in the actual delivery and help them understand how they fit into the puzzle. Because often a backstage role will not understand what their impact is on the end user experience. Technology, we're looking for those opportunities to integrate, simplify, streamline. And sometimes it's just about again, raising awareness of all your stakeholders of like, wow, there's a complicated tech stack beneath this service that limits what we can do at certain phases of the service. This is often the case. Um, Policies are something that traditionally was not included in a service blueprint, but is hugely important. And it doesn't have to be a capital P formal policy. It could be a guideline or a rule or a cultural norm, that is about how your organization delivers something that's impacting the step, or it's something that's limiting the customer interaction, or maybe providing good guardrails around that customer interaction. And so you can ask those questions of, does it make sense for us to have this policy? Should we change this policy? Do we have a gap? Do we need to put a policy in to set better boundaries, to help define and further put guardrails on that experience that we're creating? Processes. This is now we're just delving into process improvement methodology, of which I know a lot about because I have a sister team that's a process improvement team. I work closely with them. You would generate a process inventory out of the blueprint, which is awesome. And that helps you then identify which processes might need to be improved. You can do kind of maturity evaluation of those. And though that could spin off to be its own project. And if you don't have anyone in your organization who does process improvement, it might be worth you kind of looking into, well, what is this about? Because maybe I can help with this a little bit. I find that if you're comfortable operating at that service blueprint level, you'll be pretty comfortable operating at a process level. Questions, we just collect these because you can't answer everything in the room. You need to go out and follow up with folks that weren't in the room. Notes might have key action items in you want to capture. The metrics are really just helpful for capturing some of your rationale for like, oh, this is a painful part of the experience, and here's why. Like we see 60% of users having this problem. And then the critical moments and the opportunities I talked about are kind of the point for ideation. Those are those opportunity areas. And yeah, when and how to design when you reimagine an existing experience, starting from a clean slate, or kind of start for something that already exists. Let's park that one. I'll come back to it when we go through future state. So future state synthesis is similar in that we're harvesting out all these layers. And you'll see a bit of a pattern here in what the layers turn into. Um, but generally, this results in an implementation plan versus an improvement plan and kind of an action plan. And implementation, you're making something new. And so the key piece here is there's usually owners by the type of the layer. So let's walk in. Oops, I'm back. We'll walk through these layers, right? Um, storyline is from the steps, as we talked about before. Touch points, again, you're inventorying, but this time it's not about inventorying for cohesion. It's inventorying to figure out what needs to be designed. And it becomes a big to-do list of like, okay, we need to generate all these touch points to make sure that the customer experience is how we want it to be. For the roles, some of those roles might not exist today. And so it's figuring out what are those roles? How might they be staffed? How do we need to restructure our organization to support this experience? Um, Usually we're not designing something from complete scratch. And so there, if for each of these layers, you're going to have a step of, does this already exist? And how do we get to the place where we want to be? Um, for the technology, again, it's, do we already have this infrastructure or do we need to develop it? What's that going to cost? What's our feasibility study there? Um, for the policies, it's maybe we need to generate and define and write and document and disseminate all those policies and who's going to own that. Similarly, the processes, what are all the processes we need to design? And let's plan the work to actually design those processes and put them into practice, create process maps. Um, the rationale is important to capture because, and you might be capturing this more at a meta level for your whole experience. So if you're struggling to kind of capture that for each step, um, think about doing it as a step after the fact too, around why are we doing it this way? Because you're going to need to explain that. What's the business value? What's the value to the customer? And then the potential pitfalls is my favorite layer, which is how might this go wrong? And I'm just kind of a future focused scenario planner. So maybe this is where my brain goes most of the time, but what could go wrong? How can we mitigate that and make our design more resilient and make our operations more resilient? So, to your question then about when do we start from scratch or scrap what we have and start from scratch? I think if you're doing current state and it's just a mess and it's like the business is like, we're going to scrap this, that's a great time to kind of do a reimagining and say, great, let's reset. Let's do a blue sky workshop. Let's think about what this could be. Let's do some rapid, future state blueprinting, see how we can deliver these new things, present a few options up to your leaders and see what sticks, right? But most of the time, we're building on something that already exists. And so, what I like to do is a gap analysis between current state and future state. So, if you can get your team to do the current state and then set it aside, and then try to think more out of the box to design what a future state might be, then you can do kind of a differential of like what's different between the current state and the future state, and what do we need to develop to kind of cross that. Blueprinting versus journey maps. No, I haven't mentioned that all today. I have a whole article about that, if you haven't read it. So the journey map is the experience only. You're only thinking about the customer experience. What are they doing, thinking, feeling? And it's super important to get a journey map. We do that. I would recommend you do that before you do blueprinting, um, both for current and future state. You would do future state journey mapping and current state journey mapping based on data, please. But go talk to your customers and make a journey map and then use that to identify which scenario you're going to blueprint because you're looking through the lens of that journey to uncover the backstage. All right, some common challenges when you're trying to take action. Not clearly defining the next steps. What is the actual plan you're proposing? A lack of clear ownership, the lack of leadership buy-in. This is huge, so huge, and not having a sponsor. And so if your blueprint is going to generate a ton of work for your organization, your leaders better not be caught blindsided by that. You need to set expectations and begin socializing the potential output of the blueprint before you start blueprinting. And it's important to set that expectation and get sponsorship of your project, so that a leader is saying, I am all for this blueprinting effort because it's going to generate us all this great actionable work. Um, I've been in projects where we are doing more of a skunkworks type blueprint. And then you end up with, wow, we should do all these big changes. And the leaders are like, what? Where did that come from? We don't have the resources for that. We're not going to do that. Right. So this is the number one challenge for service designers generally, or for people trying to do service design in your roles, kind of covertly or overtly, and trying to get your organizations to kind of build the buy-in. You have to build that buy-in up front and kind of keep them along, and involved in the process. And I guarantee you too, make sure you're muted. Thank you. I guarantee that if you bring them into the session, that their eyes are going to open wide and they're going to be amazed at what this can do for your organization, because this is the tool that leaders have been waiting for. A leader's purview is across all the silos of the business, right? And every other manager is concerned with their silo. And that's just the way our organizations are structured. It has, it's hard not to be. And so leadership lack a lot of tools to be able to see end to end and kind of sweep the silos away and just look for things that are going to make sense. And so I guarantee if you can kind of get them to open the door, that this will become something that's extremely powerful, especially because it generates that actionable work. Okay. And so some tips, and then I think we'll open it up for questions. Follow the best practices in your organization for your cultural norms and how your organization gets work done. If you don't know what that is, go find a project manager who can explain it to you, because I guarantee you, there is someone in your organization who knows how that work gets done. And it may not be what you like, and you're not going to be able to change everything overnight. You're not going to be able to boil the ocean. So plug into how things get done and navigate the system. I saw a recent post that I bookmarked. It was like, hack the bureaucracy. Someone's doing a talk on this. And I was like, yes, that's what it's about. You need to figure out how the system works so that you can leverage it and plug into it. You also have to kind of accept that your job as a facilitator of a blueprinting project is to connect the dots. That is your job. It might feel tedious. It might not feel like the work you want to be doing, but it is the essential part of getting the work done. And then tell the story. You are the evangelist. You have to be able to, get out in front of your organization and your leaders and tell a compelling story about why we need to blueprint, about the output of the blueprint, about the future where we could be if we implement all these changes. Present a clear proposal. So you can't just take your blueprint and put it on the desk of an executive. You have to take the time to take the work and synthesize it into a plan. And if you do that collaboratively with a few key business owners who've been part of your blueprinting process, it can be really powerful because you're coming at it from a cross-functional perspective. You have multiple leaders saying, this is what we should do. We did this great process. And look, we've created this plan. Now we just need your green light and we need resources. So engaging those stakeholders to be advocates, identifying people to be accountable and work with the way your organization works to kind of get that accountability to happen, put it into backlogs, put it on roadmaps, put it into your quarterly objectives, and ensure that the work gets organized. And maybe you partner with a project manager. I've done that on technical projects when we're doing blueprinting for more technical systems or system experiences. I engage the technical PM to help me, right? So, okay, I think that's it. I do want to say, if you haven't signed up for our course, we are giving you a discount code. So if you want to learn either of the courses, current state, future state, or both of them together, this code will work on both of them. And so if that's something you're interested in, kind of leveling up your skills and really walking through the process, the future state course is brand new. It's also has tons of material in it, and we do a big follow along. So we have you open your template and we kind of walk along with us through the process, which can be really powerful to apply it to something. So feel free to grab this code. Arun can send it out after. It expires in a week, so you got to make up your mind if you want to take it. But we would love to have you benefit from the course. And yes, I can share the slides afterwards, no problem. So with that, we'll open up Q&A. I think we wanted to start with a little icebreaker, um, but I see some questions going into yeah, exactly. Alana, starting with the icebreaker. Yeah, what's a recent challenge you have had getting your organization to implement a blueprint or a service design project? I don't want to lose the questions that did get parked here. So while people are typing, let me go make sure I'm seeing those. Yeah. So Betsy, I'm going to answer your question now while people are thinking about their Zoom chats. So Betsy's question was for the categories and the way you harvest out things from the blueprint, do you do this across the whole blueprint or by phase? And you do it across the whole blueprint. If for some reason it really feels like phase distinctions are helpful, you could do it by phase, but we usually just do it across the whole blueprint. Okay, let's take a look at what people are writing in here. So, what's a recent challenge you had? Yeah, not getting not understanding why we need it, lack of understand what service design is, being told not to talk to stakeholders. Oh dear. So a culture that doesn't support the workshop format. Um, yeah, watching prioritization. And it's only for CX to do. Okay, we should talk about that. Yeah. Too many unknowns, hidden stakeholders, leadership buy-in. Don't have the time. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm empathizing with everybody. I mean, this is kind of the challenge, right? Told to translate. Yeah. So mopping up the mess. Oh, geez. Yep. Yep. So let's talk about some of these challenges, right? I think the how do you convince a leader that this is a worthwhile activity, and how do you get your organization to even want to do this in the first place? That my secret is that you don't use the jargon. Um, I think designer we suffer from wanting to be really clear in our own industry about jargon. I'm totally an example of that, right? Renaming the service blueprint, but call it whatever you're going to need to call it to get your organization to do it. And that takes learning the language of the business and not necessarily saying we're going to do a design thinking workshop or we're going to just do a service design thing. It's whatever makes sense to your leadership and talk more about the benefits and the output. So you can talk more about how we want to do a root cause analysis on the pain points in the current experience. You don't need to tell them you're doing blueprinting. You're going to apply the method. Like, you don't need to, I'm going to try this new method for doing this root cause analysis. It's supposed to let us do this in 90 minutes, but we all need to be in a room. Are we going to do it or what? Right. So I just don't, I actually, when service design and the language of service design makes sense, I use it. But most of the time I don't. I'm talking the language of the business. Right. Um, So for current state, I think it's actually really straightforward. You got a top call driver that's, generating 20% of all your customer support calls and costing the business $2 million every quarter or whatever it is. We want to investigate that. We're going to do a root cause analysis onto the customer experience. And to do it, we're going to go talk to 5 customers and then we're going to get in a room and we're going to figure it out in 90 minutes. I might be generalizing a little bit, but um, I think you have to let go of the language you're trying to promote out there, and you have to just embrace the business language. Um, it is worthwhile to do the education of your organization, and if you are a change maker, you should keep doing that. However, that is the long road, and the shorter path is to get the work done and show the value of the work. And who cares what it's called? Who cares who owns it? Who cares if you're in CX or UX or UI or whatever your role is? Like, It's that you want to kind of get the work done that matters. And if you call it some other thing, if you call it like operations mapping, great. Root cause workshop, great. I don't, it doesn't matter what you call it. So anyway, that's my like number one tip for kind of getting the organization to buy it. I'm scanning your questions a little more, or your comments a little more. So, okay, let's talk about this issue of time. Getting people, I don't have the time, I don't have the time, I don't have the time. You can do the prep work upfront to prepare the scenario by having short one-on-ones. And this could be like 15 minutes with people, um, where you sketch out what you think the experience is for the scenario you want to do some investigation into. And then you go around and you get information to kind of piece together the top layer, or top couple layers of the blueprint. Even I've done work where I prep the touch point and the customer, right? Because that's what you can get from a journey map. You can get those layers, and even capture some of those customer pain points, right? And so if you have enough of that sketched, and then you go kind of sleuthing around to find what those backstage steps to insert are, and you prep it all and you say, look, I know we don't have time, but here's the impact of this issue and the impact on the customer and the business. If we could resolve it, here's what the potential benefit could be. And so if you articulate this again, or making the business case for why we should do this, and then you say, I need these people, I think I need these people in a room for 90 minutes, and I think we could solve it. So that's a strategy to use. I really do not recommend blueprinting one-on-one. It can be done. It's a slow process, right? Where you go talk to everyone and you walk through the whole map with everyone, you get their little pieces of the puzzle. But that's not the point of blueprinting. The point is to all get on the same page, have shared terminology, and get aligned. And so try your best to convince them to get in the room. And if you need to only have 5 people there and you just don't have the full picture, maybe that's what you do. And then you show people later, and then your stakeholders will say, wow, that was an amazing session. And like, wow, you should have been there, you know? Okay. Uh, I pulled out a few of these pain points, but let's open it up for any other questions. I'm happy for people, if you want to unmute, I'd love to hear your voice. If not, feel free to type a question into chat, and I'll stop my screen share if I can find the buttons. Uh-oh.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what if you already have a big dose of the blueprint because you've got a lot of different research projects and you're trying to pull them together, and then you need to pull in SMEs, state decision makers, influencers, to then like really digest the information. I've got some ideas, but I'm curious how you would handle that.
Yeah, thank you. Betsy, that's a great comment. And it's deceptive, right? Because you have your blueprint workshop or workshops and you're like, great, we made our blueprint. But then there's a whole bunch of work that happens afterwards, really depending on the appetite and the sponsorship and the leadership buy-in. So if you're in a situation where you don't have that kind of air cover being provided, that buy-in or sponsorship, then you probably do need to spend extra time now socializing the output. And so that's where the tell the story piece comes in, of thinking about how you can tell the story of the need for this work, what it was before, what it could be, your output of your blueprint, the business case for what we should do to change it, and what the proposal is. And you could prepare different artifacts for levels of fidelity depending on your audience. So if you're trying to get the buy-in from another manager who just wasn't at the session, you say, look, hey manager, I'd love some time with you to talk about this work that we did. Sit it down, show them, make a few slides that kind of just explain it. And what's the takeaway? What should they be takeaway? Think about their motivation too. What would be beneficial to them and their team, and frame it from that lens. So this takes a little bit of like stakeholder engagement strategy, figuring out who are all the stakeholders you need to get bought in. And then the leadership piece is really important, right? So who are the leaders that you need to influence? And if you don't have direct access to those leaders, who does, and who can be your ally and partner in either getting that access, getting you on an agenda for a meeting, a leadership meeting, or getting a one-on-one to do a presentation. And I would even show them, even though you should have a presentation that talks about the output and the benefit, I would even show them the map and just be like, look at this. This is the experience. This is how complicated these steps are. And the heat map actually does a lot to kind of um, influence, like have a leader like open their eyes and say, whoa, I can see across for the first time. And so even if you're not detailing, don't walk them through every detail of the map, but you could kind of give them a little tour, you know?
Thank you. That's
I
awesome.
see. Yeah. Thanks, Sophie. I see Jane's hand up.
Hi, this is Jane from Dubai. So I have a question on managing time and setting up expectations. Okay. So once you've already get the stakeholders buy-in, you have your manager support, they want to know when what's coming out of the workshop, when it's going to be done. So one of the challenges is that I don't know how deep is the ocean. Okay. So right now, let's see our sort of goal is to map out top 10 journeys in the call center that has the highest volume, right? What if as you
Yep.
did more, it's like more stuff are coming up. How are you going to sort of use the, let's say, within a month or the weeks to understand what are you going to do and then help set up expectations?
Yeah. Every every stone overturned leads to more, more stones, right? So, and that's normal in any sort of complex system project. I think the way that I've handled this is trying to box the effort. And so whether that's through prioritization or you of some kind, right? So you say, we have these top 10 customer pain journeys that we need to address. Let's pick three. And we know there are more, but for the sake of this effort, we want a more rapid return cycle because what you don't want is a big waterfall, like heavy lift research, blueprinting effort, whatever it's going to be. And then you come out at the end with like a mountain of things for people to do in your organization. It's much better to trickle things out one at a time or a little batch at a time. And again, get a win under your belt. Like do a couple that you think are going to be a super duper win. Like if you solve that one, it'd be measurable improvement in days. Like focus on those ones because then you can get your like story of, wow, look at the impact we made. And then you could turn it into a whole, we call it improvement program, right? A continuous improvement program. A lot of organizations are trying to develop continuous improvement. Operational excellence is another term that's being used, right? But what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it would be great if it looked like every quarter we blueprint two more journeys, and then that feeds our operational improvement roadmap. That would be great, and it would just keep going forever because why not? But so I think it's thinking about boxing it, focusing on early wins, tell the story of your early wins, and then not overloading everybody involved with the output of your work all at once. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Okay, we've got a queue of hands. Mehul, tell me if I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, it is correct. Thank you. Just curious, right? So when we talk about journey and services, the starting point in my mind, based on what you described, is when an interaction is initiated from the outside to the organization. But even before that, there is a need and there is some research and there is some steps that an individual takes before you start. So
Yeah.
how do you use this for the things that we don't know about and still want to give that kind of experience? And a part me to the question is, there's a user, there's a customer, there's a decision maker, there's a financial buyer. There are different roles that make up, a decision, right? There is an interaction for a reason, and that interaction
Yeah.
gets a different outcome. So how do you take into consideration the different personas to say, or the roles that might, you know, translate into a successful interaction or a richer experience into this, or do we do this for separate, personas?
Oh, so much good stuff in there. Thank you for the question. So I'll take your first question of what about the hidden, we call it the behind the scenes of the customer experience. Because a person has a life and they are doing a lot of things in their life, and they happen to use your business and services or offerings for some of it. I mean, that's really the domain of like good user research, right? And how can we do that contextual inquiry research or interviews or customer follow me homes to learn about the bigger picture for the customer? And so then the question is, let's say you've learned that, how do you connect the dots back to the scenario and the blueprint? And what I would say is you just need to extend the edges of your scenario, and put it in there, because even if you don't have any surface to core layers under it now, that's a really fruitful generative place for your team to brainstorm, what could we do to support this step for the journey. So I think it's, in some ways you could meld a little bit of current state and future state, right? Because you're saying, look, here's an opportunity. We don't offer anything here. Our service starts at this point. We could brainstorm here and think about what we could do. And so you could do some future state blueprinting for that bit, and then do some current state and kind of meld those together, right? Yeah. Then you talked a little bit about roles, and I'll say one thing is that I've used the word customer a lot, but it's really just shorthand for whoever's experiencing the experience, the experiencer, experiencee, I don't know. And we do tons of blueprinting that's all what a customer would call all backstage. So employee experience, internal staff support services. Um, that's a lot of what we focus on, and it works at any level. So however you want to put in that experiencee slot, um, and look at that experience of, let's look at the experience of someone going out and providing IT support to people. You can just reframe it. And how are we supporting those people, right? How are we supporting them to have an effective, productive experience? So I think it's a really flexible tool. Um, Figuring out what personas to involve in your decision making. I mean, that's you're going to have to navigate within your organization, but you often need a sponsor, and who's going to kind of assign the resources for the work or pay for the work, and then you need the business owners of the various functional areas of the business, marketing, technology, whatever, to buy in, or be participants, and eventually, hopefully, get bought in. Um, and then if the people who aren't in the room are owners of the people who would do the work afterwards, like the implementation, those people need buy-in too. So I would suggest doing a stakeholder map. At the start of your project, just quickly kind of map out, like, who are all the players that are impacted or impact this scenario. Thank you for the question. It's a great one.
Thank you.
I see Elise and then Gina, and I'm going to have to have help pronouncing your name. Bavi, maybe?
Bobby, yeah, good.
Bobby. Okay, so let's take Elise and then Gina, and then we'll go to you.
Okay,
And I think I'm in chat too, so yeah.
Thank you so much. This was really great. So my question is about kind of weighing current versus future state. And so I've been kind of brought into a project where, as a service designer, where an MVP launch is kind of already in progress, and somewhat the features that they're planning on for that MVP have already sort of been spoken for and decided on from the product and business side, without a lot of design and holistic customer experience consideration. And so I'm trying to evaluate, like, we have a current state process that doesn't quite map to this very near future state MVP state that I know is coming. And so I'm trying to decide, like, is there like a mashup of the current state? Is that kind of useful? Have you recommended or worked with that sort of scenario before?
Uh, and we are often brought in at that point in a project where it's like, oh, we're about to go live. We're doing user acceptance testing. Can you come in and do user testing? I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not
Like, let's
so.
think about the customer experience now.
Yeah, here's what I would do because you don't have a lot of time and they don't have cycles to implement anything right now, probably. I think you could do a really lightweight, mix up, mash up, whatever you want to call it, of doing an analysis of the new future state to map out those potential pitfalls. Um, because that will be the biggest thing that they might need to watch out for as they're rolling this out. And if you have a very quick turnaround, like surface some potential pitfalls and solutions for those pitfalls, and that can be in change management and communications. If you're trying to just set expectations for your whoever's going to experience this new thing, um, or it could be in just quick fixes that you're surfacing. I would also suggest like a usability review of their new thing that they've made. We do that a lot at Backstage in a project it's really basically like what could go wrong? What do you want to prepare for? And what should you put in your enhancement backlog right away once this thing goes live? Because unfortunately at this phase, you're gonna have trouble influencing them or even getting their time to do anything more significant. But if you could get some wins and show the value, they might want you to do current state blueprinting post go live. So that's a thought. Hi, Gina. It's good to see you.
Yeah, Megan, sorry to interrupt.
And a couple, I know we're right at time. Maybe do we have time for one more or?
Yeah, we can take maybe another couple of questions. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I can stay for minutes. Yeah.
Hi.
All right, Gina, what's your question?
Yeah. I've got plenty, but I'm gonna pick what I liked that you responded like, oh, like let's trickle out maps as you go, get the wins under your belt. My team loves to overshare my maps and doesn't understand that a lot of them are works in progress, and I am not God. I don't know everything. In fact, I know nothing about their product, and I seem to be telling them about their product and their experience. Just great, fine. I will find these things out for you. But I make things, and then they send them out to these big groups of stakeholders, and then I get all these like territorial emails where they're like, this should not be included and da da da. I'm like, I'm telling you that you exist. That should be cool for you. No, I'm not trying to change your stuff. Do you have any thoughts on like how to manage work in progress? Like, I mean, I already write draft, like work in progress all over the damn thing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're having
bureaucracy.
Well, it sounds like you might benefit to do some stakeholder mapping and get out in front of it. And I know that's a lot of work, but go have one-on-ones with everyone involved and listen to them, have them be the center of attention, understand their motivations, understand what they care about, build trust with your stakeholders. Because it sounds like what's happening is your work is over here in a little vacuum in some way or in a bubble. And once it gets out of the bubble, it's like, wow, what is this thing? The other thing you can ask for is for your leadership and sponsorship to give you air cover, because that's not okay. If the organization has asked you to do this work, they should be explaining to all the key stakeholders involved that this work is happening and why it's important, what it's for, right? So I would say those are two tactics. It's all stakeholder management tactics. Regarding the sharing your work in progress, again, you might need, if that's the habit in your organization, you might need to get ahead of it. Build into your map more, into the artifact, like more things that explain what the artifact is for and the output of the artifact. So even if the map is this messy thing, maybe have a frame around it to give it some, because if people are going to share it and you can't control that, you got to build in some kind of protection and explanation. Those are my suggestions for you, Gina. I'm happy to connect.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I'm trying to not turn into a
hoarding perfectionists. And so these are things to try and prevent that. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. I see a bunch of people having to drop off. Thank you. I'll stay for a couple more minutes and then we can conclude. And we'll be putting this up on our Practical by Design YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Arun, for letting us do that. Vaibhavi? Did I get it right?
Thank you so much.
I'm trying.
Taking my question. It's a very general question I'm going to ask you, because what happened is that I've never worked with service blueprints before. My question to you would be, when I'm doing scenario mapping for different kinds of scenario, maybe you have an opportunity area, maybe you're trying to solve one particular problem, and then you have different scenarios that point out different problems. Now, I know you mentioned that taking those ideas and maybe you can put it anywhere, but does it happen that maybe you can get, what do you do when you get distracted? Because that, starting out as a service designer, I think that is the first thing that would happen to me. I just get distracted. So I completely understand where you're coming from when you say map out different scenarios, because that's exactly how I feel about customer journey maps as well. Map out all stakeholders so that we have a broader helpful that way. But this is a big one. How do you not get distracted?
That's a great question. And I think I'm interpreting it a little bit like once you start overturning the stones, there's more stones, right? I think defining at the beginning of your effort, or just time box your effort to like, okay, this quarter I'm focusing on these goals, and stay pretty goal oriented, and try to make your goals specific, because that can help you make decisions as more opportunities come up to look at different scenarios, or start turning over more stones, or following more branches, right? And when in doubt, return back to the primary path or the problem path that you're trying to solve. And I think it'd be great to kind of really finish something so you have an output, because otherwise it just strings on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And people get really frustrated. Your stakeholders will get frustrated. Your boss will get frustrated, right? And so I think give yourself an artificial boundary, have a specific goal in mind that can help to create some bounds around the work. And then if you can it's like get the wins out of that and then move to the next thing. It is really hard, and we get pulled in a lot of different directions, because whenever we're interacting with a complex system, and an organization is a complex system, and a service is a complex system, it's really easy to get pulled into all the threads or the organizational issues or whatever is coming up. And so I think the more you can almost protect yourself by saying, no, my goals for this effort are this, it can help you keep on task. That's my suggestion.
What I understand from a service blueprint is that we don't have a particular goal. There's a problem, there are steps, there's processes, there's opportunity, there's pain points, but we are not considering goals. So is there a structure that I can actually to goals? How do I
absolutely,
for my research?
Yeah. So if you start with the opportunity space you're working in, so you're saying, okay, we're going to improve onboarding for this thing.
Right.
Your goal should be, we want to see a significant improvement in onboarding. And if you've done customer research, you might know the pain points. So you can say, I want to improve these pain points for customers. And here's how we will measure the improvement before and after our blueprinting activity and the implementation of the improvements.
Right.
And so I think it's getting really specific and doing that work up front to define it almost as a project. Like, what's the project and the goal of the project, and kind of keep it in those bounds and anchor it in either the customer experience or the backstage thing. So you could say, if there's backstage pain points, and then the goal could be, we're trying to improve these backstage pain points while also improving the customer experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was so good.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we're over time by a little bit. I would love to keep connecting with all of you. I see more faces I recognize. Hi, Daphne. So it's so great to see everyone. I could probably talk all day on this. Thank you again for having us or having me. I'm really sorry Eric couldn't make it, but I hope this has been fruitful and people have gotten a lot out of it.